Push the Point are now partnered with Living Realms, a pioneering local game store for Flesh and Blood in the UK from the very beginning. Push the Point patrons now get 5% discount on the Living Realms online store, so go check it out. Please enjoy the episode.
Hey everybody, welcome back to another awesome special episode of where I have, well, I will say I'm a fanboy just a little bit here. I have got Zach Bunn from Team Covenant, who is kind of a massive influence for me personally, and quite a lot of people I feel here for the UK, who has basically done so much work on YouTube with Team Covenant, and he's basically he just showed off quite a lot of games that I know and love and played throughout the 30, well, I mean, I've been doing this for a lot longer than 13 years, but I've been running a club for 13 years. And ever since we've discovered you guys from Netrunner, every new game that's kind of came out, as well as Shut Up and Sit Down, which is another big YouTuber which in the UK space, you and Shut Up Sit Down, if you said there's a game that you're interested in or you're looking at, it got our attention to at least check it out and have a look at it. So I've been watching and following you since probably 2013, 2014. Is that when you started doing the Netrunner data pack reviews? I remember them. They were wild.
Yeah, that's exactly it. So Netrunner came out in late 2012, and then I think our first unboxing for Netrunner technically was like late 2012, but it was on like a shaky hand cam.
Yeah.
And then very quickly by 2013 is when we started adding the like cards showing up on screen and high quality cameras and stuff. But yeah, that's the right time frame. And also I just wanted to say very, very happy to be here and happy to be on the show. I think content creators like yourself are a huge part of what makes these tabletop gaming communities so special and so fun to be a part of. So, and I know firsthand experience that creating content is very hard. And running gaming clubs like you're doing is very hard. So kudos to you for putting in the work, and pleasure to be on.
Thank you so much, dude. It's a bit of a tale. It's a different. I definitely know that you've got a different sort of journey, because you obviously, when you started up your online store back in 2007, I believe, and I don't know, what did you say it was like? When was it when you set up your store? When was that?
Like our physical local store?
Yeah. And your
so we actually opened
black. You see
yeah. We opened our local store for the first time in March of 2012, so a little over 10 years ago now. And we were operating online before that for about 5 years, getting to the point where we had the resources to, buy all those buckets of black paint and paint the ceiling and open a store.
Well, I think it's one of those things where I kind of feel like I know your journey a little bit, apart from the one thing that we didn't have too much of a massive worry about is being able to generate like money to fund our lives, because it wasn't our livelihood, but it still had a lot of the same sort of trappings and stuff of generating interest, generating people to come down, being consistent, having a good venue space for people to actually want to come to you. Why you? There's so many other places about that generate that interest. Why would they want to come to you? So I kind of feel where you start, where you're at, where it's that whole, you got to start something up. And I think it's overall, it's consistency, isn't it? It's just keep going, play the long game. The short game is rough. The mid game is probably rougher, but
man, yeah. I mean, I think a big part of it, at least for us, because we were coming from no experience, no resources, no money. Just had a dream, honestly, and a vision for what we thought tabletop could be. And for us, it was all about the long game and being not willing to give up, essentially, no matter what the circumstance is. And if you bang your head against the wall long enough, eventually you maybe hopefully get somewhere. That's not guaranteed or promised. And I don't know. There's definitely tough parts in the beginning and the middle. The beginning was a little easier because a lot of us were in college, so it was a passion project that we could do and not not necessarily have the same consequences of not making money as we would during the middle phase.
Yeah.
When we're adults and dating and getting married, and some of us having kids, and when you're young, you don't have health issues, and there's all that stuff going on.
Yeah.
But yeah,
it's kind of like the honeymoon period, isn't it? And I always say, like, the first 2 years is like, it's kind of like a relationship you have with a partner, or you've got a group of people, and you're all different people, and you're all jumping in because you've all got that commonality of the same interests, and you're buzzing. You're all just buzzing on, like, oh God, we're here, we're doing it, ooh, here we go, and you kind of just, there's loads of things that could go wrong, but that doesn't matter, right? We're here. You've got a fresh start, and after probably about a year or two, and then you're kind of going, right, I'm starting to actually get to really know these people in a different emotional, way, because I'm working with them rather than we're just pals. We're in the game and we're just going to do this as pals. Now we've got to be a team, and there's some difficult conversations about growth, about where things should go going forward. I know that we had that in our little gaming club as well, which again is a very different sort of aspect to yours, because we're not trying to generate money, but it's in fact the weirdest thing is we're actually all losing money, because there's no
I know that feeling.
Yeah, there's no money. We don't make money out of doing all this, and the irony is none of us lived in the town we made the club in, so we're all spending petrol. I know, ridiculous. We're all spending petrol, we're all spending money, and we're driving there all of our free time, and it's just to go, why are we doing this? And it's because we want to show, which I relate to you guys when you started coming up. This is probably why I connected with you so much, is that it's not about us. It's about the community. It's bigger than us. It's about the community. It's about providing a good quality space for the community to come and meet up and enjoy playing games and socializing. And for our area in Northampton, that was it. That was our core. That was our goal. And we know we're losing money. It's like a band, when you go to band practice, and you're like, what? Hundreds of pounds on bass and guitars and drums and cymbals. Where are you getting your money? It's no money, bro. Just doing it. And we're gonna meet up and pay someone to practice, and then we'll go to a gig. No money. You're just doing it because it's just fun and enjoyable. And then it gets to that point. And why? Why are we doing this?
Why do you think, for you, I'm curious to hear why.
Welcome to
why do you think that was
Zach
important,
Bunn Push
right?
the Point podcast, where he's going to be more.
I'm gonna ask. I'm the captain now. But I am genuinely curious, because I think just hearing your story, there's a lot of people like you, right? Who either have gaming clubs or open a store or run their local Flesh and Blood events. I know a handful of people that if they weren't doing it, the store wouldn't have the events, right?
Yeah.
But I'm curious what your answer to that question is, because it's obviously big enough to keep you going. But why do you think that's so important to offer that space?
It's kind of a curious one. I mean, I think everyone's got their own personal journeys, their own communities, their own areas in their country, in their space, wherever, has kind of their own little story as to why their space matters to them. So when we started, we had a little gaming store. Lasted like 2 years and then self-destructed, as they all mostly do. And we kind of had a little community going there. So it all just started up with, I kind of made friends with quite a few people here. Why would we want to give this up? So we just said, should we do this ourselves? Basically we all wanted to play War Machine, because UK's got a lot of Warhammer based stuff. So
sure.
40k and Age of Sigmar or Fantasy at the time, easy, you can play them. But we want to play War Machine. We want to play all these other stuff that you can't play. So long story short, we just said, well, we'll just do a club. And then our drive, kind of like how a lot of people do things, like our drive was, we kind of want to make a really good space. We want to, we really want to deliver on a good gaming space for people. At first it was just a space, and then I think I actually got inspired by watching you guys. When I saw you guys pop up, and you're like, we value creating a really great space and area to promote the game as much, the games and the space for people as much as possible. And then we were also had this fantasy idea of setting up a store. And I just said, look, if we're going to do it, got to do it like these guys. Like, these guys know it's not just a store with a warehouse full of boxes absolutely everywhere. I don't know where any of the stuff is. It's just kind of like, this is what you do. You know what I mean? In like the between 2000 and 2010, it's like it's like my background, but board games. It's like, I can't find anything. And whatever. And I remember watching you guys and being like, oh, these guys have got it. It's all about quality. It's about space. It's about, it's kind of about the energy or the tone you set in the space that you're in as well. I mean, I don't know. I've never been to your spot, but that's the feeling I got from watching your videos, that you generally did care, and you kind of do, and you were sort of promoting your store and your space through YouTube as well, which I never really saw a lot of other stores do that much. And if they were, I mean, they weren't. I didn't see any. And it's like, oh, you know, how would I promote product through the stuff? And it's like, well, clearly passion, and passion with passion comes content. And then if you're showing to people that you genuinely care about the stuff that you're selling, just do some cool videos, do some gameplay stuff. I remember your Netrunner tournaments. I was just like, I'm hooked, I'm signed up. And in fact, all of that drove sales our end, weirdly enough. Yeah, people were watching you guys do the stuff, and it made them want to play. And we then went, well, we're a space for you to do that. So then I was watching your tournaments and then emulating, doing tournaments in our club for Netrunner and Conquest and everything. So it all just bounced off. Really.
That's awesome.
Yeah. So there you go. And the reason I'm talking a lot about myself is because what I want to basically in this long overarching story is that you guys have been very important to a lot of places and spaces like we have in the UK community. So I'm not speaking for everyone, but I'm speaking for the entirety of the UK. Thank you for
wow, for the entirety of the UK.
Yeah, I'll speak for the UK. You're welcome.
Yeah, well, that's really awesome to hear, right? I think for us, there was this thing that, like you were saying, you had this really powerful experience that was kind of threatened to go away because that local store went away, right?
Yeah,
and stores come and go all the time. For us, it was just this understanding that there's this hobby, this experience that's really powerful and important to us. And everywhere we looked, especially back in 2006, 2007, I didn't have the words like this back then. I was just really frustrated. But it just seemed like people didn't care, right? If it wasn't selling me a box of Magic or whatever it was, they just cared about the transaction. And for us, the transactions need to happen, right? That's how you make money. It's how you pay staff. It's how you pay for a space, etc. But it's never been about the transaction, because we always understood there was something way more powerful going on than a sale, right? Anyways, it's interesting to hear your take on it. It's also gratifying, I think, is the right word, and humbling that anything we were doing, here in Tulsa, Oklahoma, was positively impacting people from all over the world. And back then, I would never have guessed someone from the UK cared about what we were doing, let alone
it's weird, isn't it?
That it like actually mattered, and it actually meant something to you. So that's really cool to hear. I appreciate you sharing that.
No, it's all good. I think we all start. I would say that there was a wave. I think you guys, the timing of when you guys arrived, and the timing of I honestly think when Netrunner, or when Fantasy Flight Games just started producing Netrunner, because I think a lot of people say to me, because we were kind of like flabbergasted when Netrunner hit the scene, because we were a wargaming club. We did War Machine, we did 40k, we did Age of Sigmar. We didn't do card games, no card game. That's for. And then Netrunner just kind of came about, and then all of a sudden there was just this huge. We had like 16 people, and it even got to the point where we had to have like these really tough talks about what are we? Well, we're just a game.
Yeah.
We're just a game in space, right? But I think there was a wave. There was definitely like a movement of people moving to board games, card games, like all that sort of stuff. When Fantasy Flight dropped Netrunner, I don't think it was Netrunner that did it. Just the timing of it all. And then you guys were making videos for this stuff, and I don't know whether there was maybe something a little bit more than that, but I think the timing of where things went just kind of went, whoa, okay. There is a lot of people, and it's new people. That was the fascinating bit. The amount of new people we got into our end, and I don't know, I'll ask that question to you for your side. We kind of just kept hold of a core group of people that we knew played games, and they kept showing up. And then when Netrunner and everything just went forward, was like, whoa, what the hell, man? There's like just 5 people coming in new each week, going, like, what's going on? Like, what is it? Did you experience that down your end?
Yeah. So, my kind of perspective on this is I got into card games in the late 90s with Pokemon when it came out, and I was a kid.
Yeah, I was. Yeah.
Yeah, and my older brothers had always collected like baseball cards and comic book cards and stuff, and so this was kind of my thing, right? Pokemon cards and Pokemon the video game. My little brother Tim, same thing. And I'd kind of always been into tabletop since then, but I think kind of witnessing it in the 2000s, there was kind of this board game moment. You have games like Catan and Ticket to Ride, where they really like mainstream beyond Monopoly and Sorry and that kind of stuff happened. And then Covenant started in 2007, and we were very focused on a couple collectible games at the time, but
Spoils, wasn't it?
Yeah, that was the first game.
I've never heard of that before ever. I was like, oh man, you're hanging your hat on that one. I didn't know that card.
So there was a guy owned a local shop who I'd played Star Wars and Lord of the Rings TCGs with in high school.
Yeah.
And he introduced me to the Spoils, which I didn't really know at the time was basically a game with this kind of like comical, pop culture, goofy theme.
Right.
And fantasy. So it was like set in this bizarro fantasy land, had a lot of movie quotes and a lot of references that I didn't get because I was young and I grew up sheltered. But it ultimately was basically trying to take the fundamentals of Magic and fix the problems of it. Yeah. So fix the mana issues and there's all kinds of problems that they saw with Magic, all the way to organized play. And so I was not, when I was growing up, was not allowed to play Magic. Dungeons and Dragons, scary, wizards, magic, all that kind of stuff.
All right.
And I was also a little too young. Like it hit when I was kind of a little younger and wouldn't have been able to catch it. But all that to say, I didn't even understand how much like Magic that game was because I didn't really have experience with Magic. I just played the Spoils.
Right.
But you kind of see these waves of, and it's tough to separate industry waves from our own growth as a company because the industry in 2007 when we started, we were, and we still are ultimately tiny, but we were very tiny. And so as we're growing, it doesn't mean anything for the industry, right? Like we're just slowly doing our thing. But definitely, so we opened our local store in 2012.
Yeah.
And we had been doing games like The Spoils and then Monster Apocalypse and a couple other games. And then opening the local store, the Gen Con before that in 2011, one of our goals when we were there was like, we're going to look for games that we think would make a lot of sense locally, but that might not make as much sense online, right?
Right.
Because up until that point, most of our online stuff had been collectible games and singles and booster boxes and that whole business. And that's when I ran into Game of Thrones and Lord of the Rings, the LCGs.
Yeah.
And it was like, oh, like, hey, this could be like a really cost-effective local card game, right? It's like, it doesn't make a lot of sense online for us, but like it could work locally. And that's actually how we ran into and started interacting with Fantasy Flight. So we started doing podcasts and videos and stuff.
Yeah.
And we definitely, even from opening the local store and doing the content we were doing, expanding into these kind of, ultimately, we had sort of always been into the underserved games. It's like Lord of the Rings TCG was never Magic or Pokemon or Yu-Gi-Oh! And like Star Wars TCG and Spoils and that kind of stuff.
I think that's what actually got a lot of people interested in hearing what you've got to say, because it wasn't just 40k Magic, Pokemon, Yu-Gi-Oh! We knew them, right? You can get them anywhere. Yeah. And what about the other games?
Yeah. So we that was part of our journey. It was like, even for the big games, it seemed like there were a lot of people in the industry that didn't really care that much about the hot. It's like stores were dirty and crowded, and it just didn't seem like anyone was really trying. But specifically, if you didn't play Magic or Pokemon or Yu-Gi-Oh, it was even far worse, right? Like if you want tournaments, you've got to do it, all that kind of stuff. So we've always very much focused on, not the big games, as it were. But all that to say, 2012, X-Wing and Netrunner both were released at Gen Con, or pre-released at Gen Con, and then they both came out that year. And both of those games were huge for us in terms of, subscribers. We have a subscription service for a lot of these games in terms of YouTube subscribers and content and stuff.
Yeah.
And we had been doing content the whole time. But it's like we were getting warmed up for this, right? For these games with these big audiences. And I think what really happened between those two games is there was the audience was growing in general, because you have Magic and Pokemon Yu-Gi-Oh! Kind of reaching that 20-year mark. And then you have board games bringing a bunch of people in. And you also have FFG, who was very good about creating excitement at Gen Con specifically.
Yes.
And so that the year they had the X-Wing and Netrunner starters at Gen Con is still the longest line I've ever seen. Like,
wow.
By a lot. Like, it was this huge convention hall, and the line was going from their booth all the way to the edge, all the way around entire
Where was
thing.
Gen Con? Was it in Indianapolis that time?
Yeah. It's been in Indianapolis for as long as I can remember.
I've been there. I've managed, luckily enough, to see it, so I can envision how long this queue was. Did it go outside?
It was just wrapping around, and you had to like walk. If you're going anywhere, you had to walk basically through this line, right, to get to wherever you're going to Gen Con. And it's just it was the thing that year, right? Yeah. But yeah, I definitely think they got a lot of people who had been playing board games or had been playing other big card games to move into this non-collectible card game space, right?
Yeah.
Through Netrunner specifically, and also X-Wing, like Star Wars.
Yeah, that was huge.
Not long after they launched X-Wing, they announced that Disney had bought Lucasfilm, and so there was this like new interest in Star Wars, and there hadn't been a Star Wars game, especially an expandable game, in a long time. For like a decade. So yeah, they had a lot of mojo going at that time, and it was a huge moment of growth for us, for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. So moving in from all these games, and then, I mean, I don't want to go. Funny enough, everyone, this is a Flesh and Blood podcast. We will get there. We will get there eventually. But we went going through I'd probably just say the journey of FFG's learning through the LCG model of everything was quite an interesting. I think it was an interesting experiment. I thought it was a really cool model initially. I'd love to get your thought. I think I'm pretty sure you must have said this on your stream, definitely at some point. But I'd love to get your thoughts on.
Yeah, a lot of stream content, so hard to find it.
Yeah. The LCG model, I thought was actually quite interesting. It was really, really cool if you got in like early on. But then it also gets to this growth point, doesn't it? From all their games, they just go, this is a bit of a bloated mess. And then, by set 8, I remember in Netrunner, by set 8, we'll rotate out. I'm like, oh, Jesus Christ. I'd have a wardrobe full of cards by the time that comes out. And it's a shame. That's all I've got to say. It's a shame. I think throughout the whole time, I don't know whether you saw this as well, that especially the Netrunner and the Conquest IP stuff that came round that just kind of felt like someone's just killed your show mid season 2. You're like, oh, where's my ending? Wait, no ending, bro. Here's your Necrons. Ta-da.
Yeah,
just like,
it was rough.
And I think since then, it's kind of just going it felt a little bit going downhill on that side. How did that feel for you as obviously you guys rode that huge FFG wave? That was your biggest thing. How was that? How are you feeling when that was started to go a little bit shaky?
Yeah, it was definitely an interesting phase. In a lot of ways, I think, it was a really critical moment of growth for us. And I also think we contributed a lot to the success of those moments, right?
I agree.
And so we fundamentally, like, I'm a huge fan of Fantasy Flight Games, of Christian T. Peterson, of a lot of the designers at FFG. And they definitely, from 2012 until about 2000, let's say 18, 19. Because 2018 was Keyforge, 2019 was Marvel Champions. 2017 would have been L5R, 2016 would have been Destiny and Arkham.
Yeah.
Which Destiny is collectible. That's a whole different story. Yeah, and in there we also had Imperial Assault and Conquest and Game of Thrones 2.0. Lord of the Rings LCG was doing its thing. I mean, it's there was that.
Yeah, they were on fire. Yeah, every year whenever they owned Gen Con, didn't they? Oh, what are they doing now? And every time there's something new, just everyone goes nuts.
Yeah. But yeah, I think what you said is accurate, which is the LCG model is really cool, right? And I think there's this assumption that a fixed distribution, cheaper price point is going to make it a lot more accessible to people. And I think that is true.
It is true.
When you're first starting out. But LCGs tend to hit this point 2 to 4 years in where it's all fixed, but at the same time, the two things happen. For a new player to get into the game, a lot of times at that point, there weren't good onboarding tools. So at that point, you kind of, if you want to buy everything, you're going to have to spend $800 to $1,500, and you have to find all these different releases and all these different cards. It's not easy, right? And then even then, you're kind of coming in. There's not a draft sealed format, so if you're playing constructed, like, you're going to walk into a room with people that have been playing for 3 years and they have all the cards. Like, I remember with Game of Thrones, we always used to say, like, if you want to get into Game of Thrones, just prepare to lose for 2 or 3 years. Like, but really though, like, just prepare to lose for a couple years. And if you're willing to go through that, you can join the Game of Thrones community. And then also for the people that played the whole time, at first, a pack of 60 cards, which is really just usually 20 unique cards, comes out. And at the very first, that's exciting. Every month you get a new little something, right?
I loved it. I loved it.
Yeah. But then 2 or 3 years in, it's like one pack comes out and it doesn't really change anything. Yeah. And so you get 3 or 4 releases in a row, and it's like, well, and a lot of times, they would do these cycles of 6 packs that have a theme. And so, like, the first pack comes out and it's like, well, these are some new cards, but, like, it doesn't quite work yet. And Netrunner was the same way, right? It's like, oh, we're working in stealth credits, but we only get some cards.
Yeah. And then pack 1, you're like, okay.
Yeah, it's like, okay.
I'm sure this will make sense in 6 weeks.
Yeah, so it's that slow burn eventually becomes a problem, because unlike a TCG where you get 200 new cards all at once, you never get that in an LCG. So the barrier to entry gets higher, and also the excitement gets lower as time goes on. And you see that where there's just kind of this burn, this churning that happens too, right? Yeah. So it is interesting. I think in the end, it works a lot better for cooperative games.
I was just going to say that, because it sounds in a competitive tournament standing sort of thing. Yeah. Unfortunately, amazing, well-designed game, marketed, started off really well. In the end, you're just walking towards doom. But when I played Arkham Horror, and I loved that game. I love that game so much. And then when I was like, oh, okay, so it's an LCG co-op. All right, yeah, let's play it. loved it. And then I went, oh, this makes total sense. Like immediately, this was like, okay, we
Yeah.
Netrunner, Conquest, L5R. I didn't play Game of Thrones, but we're like, oh, yeah, we've been through the Doom 3 times now.
Yeah.
I was just like, I don't see there's a Doom here. There's no one cares. I was like, it's just an very slow, gradual, expanding board game. That's it.
Yeah. Which I think makes a lot of sense.
Of course,
and
yeah.
The other issue with the LCG model, especially for the competitive games, and I'm learning this more. Destiny was the first collectible game we did since, there was like a 8-year period where we didn't really do collectibles, but Destiny opened my eyes after we had so long of having no collectible games, because the other downside of LCGs is it is cheaper for the players, but the economic model is also a lot weaker. And so what that means is that the publisher and the stores have a lot less money to work with, right? And so, if you have, we had a very early on, 2012 when we opened, we were heavily focused on Game of Thrones, and Game of Thrones, the show was kicking off, and like there was a lot of excitement there. But we had 25, 30 people showing up most weeks for our Game of Thrones League night. And so, even then though, we were one of the bigger Thrones communities, you have 20 or 30 people that are buying a $15 pack once a month. And you're making probably $5 or $6 a pack. So you make a couple $100 a month off of this 30-person community that you are supporting and building.
And so you're basically living off, please buy snacks.
Yeah, I mean, it's crazy. So like, we're charging entry fees and stuff, but like we worked really hard in those early years and had an incredible community of people. But we just weren't making any money at all. And so I think a lot of times what happened with LCGs was people wanted the Magic Pokemon tournament support on an LCG product, which is just not sustainable, even for the publisher, right? Because like they're also making significantly less money on those transactions. So it is a very cool mod. I think it's perfect for cooperative games. And it's a lot harder to make a competitive game work that way.
And then you were saying Destiny just opened your eyes of like, oh wow, okay, cool. We can just keep selling, keep selling.
I mean, I use this example quite often. I don't know the exact math anymore, but the moment that really blew my mind with Destiny was the first set came out and it was crazy. Demand was nuts. It's this whole thing. That's a whole story. I won't go into that. But the second or third set, I remember one night, it was a Friday night, I was in the store and it was the release day for one of the Destiny sets.
Mm-hmm.
And so we had a subscription so people could sign up and automatically get boxes, but that would charge a couple weeks before release. We also did a thing called Saga sets where you could basically buy a play set before the set came out.
I remember you guys did that. I was like, oh, that's really cool actually. Get the lot.
Yeah, that was very successful for us and very popular. But even past all that, right? For the local players who didn't buy the Saga sets and didn't have a subscription, on the release weekend, that one night, I noticed as I was sitting there playing, like, just how many boxes were moving, right? Like a good number of boxes people were buying in store on the day it released.
Yeah.
So that night I got home and it was late, right? The store closed at 11. And I was just on my phone. I just wanted to look, like, I wonder how much we sold tonight of just this new set of Destiny. And I ran the math back, and it was something like 20 to 25 times. Basically, the amount of money we made, like actual profit off of selling boxes that night, was the equivalent of how much we would make off of Game of Thrones, the LCG at the time.
Yeah.
In an entire year, multiplied by, I think it was like 24 or 25 times.
In one night.
And it wasn't even like aggressive, right? Like we do a lot of pre-sales happen because of subscriptions, and we have Saga sets, and like we aren't really, I talked earlier about more than the transaction. So a lot of our transactions or revenue happens before, like, we don't stop. It's not like we're a warehouse, right? Where we just have a ton of this product and people come in and buy it off the shelf all the time, right? Our retail store, in air quotes, retail store, at the time, 2.0 had probably a 6 foot wide by 5 foot tall shelving system for products like that was our retail section, right? Everything else is just the space that you hang out and play in.
Yeah.
And we have the back offices and we have inventory back there and shelves and all that kind of stuff. So all that to say, like, I'm sure there were other stores that it was even crazier, right? Like, because the way most stores work is they get product in, they sell it to you in person, right?
Yeah.
So anyways, that was just like a moment. And then, at the time too, because we had a very robust local Star Wars Destiny community, and you see this kind of revenue coming in, like we were able to spend a ton of resources marketing and having events and hosting events for Destiny specifically. Meanwhile, our Game of Thrones crowd, who had been with us, our community since 2012, right, was kind of getting a little frustrated because it was like, I don't understand how you can, have a tournament every weekend for Destiny, and you have all these prizes, and you're creating these custom tokens, and you have these things going on in this series, and it's like, well, honestly, like,
makes a living.
And even beyond the monetary, is like, we just have 40 or 50 people showing up every Saturday to play Destiny. So why wouldn't we support that? Like,
yeah.
And, it's a little chicken and egg there. Like, well, if you did more for Thrones, we'd have more players. And it's like, yeah, but we're doing a lot already, right? Like, it's not like we're not promoting this game or this community or these events. But all that to say, that was just kind of a very eye-opening moment where the feeling to me was, again, they wanted the Destiny level of tournament support on the $15 a month pack model. And that just doesn't fundamentally add up, right? Unless people like you are willing to host things that inherently just are losing money, which a lot of people do.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Now, when obviously Destiny moved on, I kind of feel like when Fantasy Flight fell from Flight, and maybe they're still going. Maybe I'm being really harsh. I'm sitting here on my side of the pond in our little community, seeing it for how it is on our side. But it looked like it fell from grace pretty out of nowhere, because it just felt like the Keyforge thing was kind of going on. It was like somewhere in the middle of this. It was like in the new game that came out was like, here's the new game. What about all the old games? What about the old games? New game. And then it was like, I think everyone, I think for a lot of us, got a bit fed up of, like, if you get into this game, it feels like in 3 years time, it's kind of done, really. Move on to the next one. So where, I don't know, is that how you felt? Where did you guys feel needed to go from there when Destiny moved on and Keyforge and was?
So the timeline for us was, I think it was 2016, 2017, Fantasy Flight Games merged with Asmodee.
Yeah.
And that's just a notable piece, because I think the Asmodee strategy was quite a bit different than Fantasy Flight games. And you have Destiny came out late 2016 and Arkham, and then 2018 was Keyforge, and then 2019 was Marvel Champions. And so as time went on, like, I think it was 2016, 2017 when they did the kind of Netrunner 2.0 and Game of Thrones 2.0, and it was Netrunner Revised Core, right? And then they announced the end of Netrunner, which was a travesty, right?
It was a funeral.
Yeah. And effectively, what we saw happening was more and more as time went on, kind of this move away from competitive. So it's really a shame, and a lot of it's tied to the pandemic, honestly. Which is, in 2020 they had planned to do a Keyforge tournament circuit that was like $300,000 or $400,000 in cash, and it was right before the pandemic when they announced that Destiny was going to be ending. So Destiny went right up to the pandemic. They had this Keyforge tournament series planned. L5R was still around at the time. The LCG, the pandemic hits. Keyforge stops getting made. L5R stops getting made. The tournament series for Keyforge goes away. Destiny goes away. So it's kind of right then, in that moment, when they'd been leaning this direction, but it was officially like, at this point, they're kind of out of the expandable competitive game zone. They sold off Keyforge to the FFG original founder, Christian T. Peterson's new publishing house, Ghost Galaxy Games. So that's kind of getting a reboot under a new brand. And currently they only have Marvel Champions and Arkham Horror that are FFG expandable. They even moved X-Wing over to Atomic Mass, the company that is doing Crisis Protocol, which is that is a brand owned by Asmodee.
Right.
But yeah, that kind of all coalesced into 2020, where they sort of just got out of that zone.
Yeah. And I imagine really, and this is kind of taking a little while for this big leading up question of here we are now with Flesh and Blood.
We finally got here.
We finally got here, everybody, and I don't care because I've enjoyed. So, Flesh and Blood, how much has that made a? Because I know that you did it with Champions. Let's just they had a shot. You had a go. It was good fun, and then they imploded on themselves. And then Flesh and Blood came along, and did you realize how big of a game this was probably going to be when you first? Basically, you're the reason why I played this game, right? Because there was 2 games that came out. Skytear, you did Skytear, and I was like, oh, that looks really cool. I'll play that. And then the next week you did Flesh and Blood, and I was like, bro, I just come out of Champions. I am not touching another brand new TCG ever again. But then I watched you play it, and I was like, this looked really cool. This looked really good. I'll play Skytear. So well done. But like, did you see how? Well, obviously, you probably don't think anyone foresaw how this was going to go. But like, are you surprised? I suppose about how the journey of Flesh and Blood came in and where it is now. Like, is it taking you by surprise about them as a company and where the game's gone?
Yeah. So a little context. Flesh and Blood originally came out in late 2019. And I didn't hear about it then. And then in 2020, before the pandemic,
it was February.
Ian,
I remember.
Yeah,
around about February time.
Ian, who previously worked there, was a fan of the show. He'd watched our content for a long time and stuff, and he was working there in marketing. And so they sent us a like introductory kit, right? And it was like a couple booster boxes and the welcome to Wraith starters.
Oh, was it the alpha?
And this
set?
really, yeah.
And
like a really nice handwritten note that was basically like, hey, we'd love for you to check out our game. And we get sent games all the time,
I bet
right?
you do.
But the things that stood out to me were the handwritten note was on a 4x6 postcard that was really nice, like really high quality.
Is it their Living Legend Story Studio?
Legend Story Studios.
Their cut.
So
yeah.
And it was this really nice card, and then we opened a box and a starter, and we were opening a couple packs, and it was like, oh, okay. Just looking at cards, and there was some good art and some art that was pretty good, and like it just looked like a TCG, right?
Yeah.
And then the thing, so we got it, and it looked nice, and we are like, hey, like we've been streaming on Mondays, because we started that in 2019 doing Marvel Champions, Marvel Mondays streams.
Yeah.
And then after that had kind of like released and stuff, we were like, well, let's keep streaming on Mondays, but we'll switch it up. We'll do some other stuff.
Yeah.
And so we got this in. It was like, hey, let's just try this new game on stream.
Yeah.
So we tried the game, and then the stream ended, and Steven and I looked at each other, and we both knew, and it was like, all right, let's play again. Because we wanted to play more games, right?
Yeah.
And then slowly we just kind of like kept wanting to play it and talk about it, right?
Right.
And so at the time, that was February. So in March, they were releasing the second set, Arcane Rising. And we'd started just having some conversations. Because for us, it's like when we find a game, one, we have to enjoy the game itself and think it's, a good quality game, which used to be a hurdle, right? There were a ton of games in 2010, 2012, 2014 that didn't pass this bar. But most games at this point, like the art's good enough, the design's good enough, the quality's good enough, etc. But then the next step for us is actually talking to the publisher, right? And it's, who are you? Why are you making this game? What do you believe in? What's your vision? What's your goal? What's your plan for success? Because we've interacted with a ton of publishers, even Fantasy Flight, who was pretty successful. had a lot of games that came and went in a 2 to 4 year period. So, if this is a game we're going to recommend to someone, who makes it? Do we believe in this game? Do we believe in what they're trying to achieve? Do we think they're going to be here in a decade, or what is it, right?
Kind of like when you went through you must have had that sort of thing when you did Replay Fusion, like, oh yeah, here's a new one. Okay, right, we're not doing that.
Don't want to do that again. And I really liked the team at Play Fusion. I happened to be, and there was a really good game, and it was innovative, and they were trying some interesting concepts, and they had the app and like a whole thing. Yeah. So Ben started having some conversations, and then the pandemic hit, right? And it was like, what is happening? Had to close the store. Asmodee announced they weren't going to be releasing any products until stores could open back up. So, and a lot of the other publishers were doing the same. So our revenue kind of just disappeared overnight. Started having conversations internally and doing the math. I'm like, all right, well, and it's literally happened. I was doing the weekend after we had to close the store, and Asmodee announced they weren't releasing stuff. It was like, okay, how many months can we pay everybody? Like, and all right, figure that out. And that's like, all right, what can we do that is, true to who we are and what we want to do that can possibly make money, so we can extend how long we can possibly pay everyone, right? Like, and let's shoot straight with everybody. But ended up having more conversations, and to answer your question, I don't think anybody knew what Fab was going to do. No. Right. I think what happened to Fab in 2020 is nuts.
It was bonkers.
But what I do know is that my phone calls and chats with James at Legend Story, I knew the game would be successful, right? Yeah. And so the game was great, and a lot of games are great. But I was really, really impressed by James and his vision and his mentality and his passion. And, I'd learned more stuff later on about his experience getting to where he's at. Yeah. But I could just, you can just tell. You do this long enough, you've had enough conversations, and I could tell he had that same fire where for us at Covenant, right, it's like failure is not really an option. Like, we're going to keep doing this until we're dead. Yeah. And it doesn't matter success or failure. We're going to run through this brick wall and figure it out. Yeah. And that's the sense I definitely got from him with Flesh and Blood. And this is his dream, and this is his vision. This is what he wants to be doing. Here's why he's doing it. All that aligns. So I thought it'd be very successful. I thought it would be successful. Yeah. I don't know how successful, right? And so when we started streaming Flesh and Blood regularly in like June, July of that year, it was a different time. A lot of people weren't there for that, but we had the bundle where you could buy a box of Welcome to Wraith Alpha and Arcane Rising, $150, came with 2 cold foil weapons randomly, free shipping. We had the free Ira starter decks that we sent to thousands and thousands of people.
If only you all knew, everyone. Where were we? Yeah. Where were you?
And like, it was regularly available. There weren't a lot of stores that cared about it. I remember at the time, I think it was TCG Player had actively said, no, we're not going to add Flesh and Blood. And there was just a lot of, they're a small publisher, right? Like, how do you get everyone to try and care about your game? And it's very tough. It's a very tough thing to do, actually. And we started streaming. I assume that's when you saw the February stream, but you probably saw the rest of the streams too, where we just started.
Weirdly enough, I didn't, because I had a kid. So everything I had a newborn in April of 2020. So COVID, nice. Newborn, I kind of just went, see you later, planet Earth. I'm off for half a year. So there was nothing, nothing was coming through. And then I kind of was, when near the end of the year, where things started to looking like, I don't know what I don't even know what's going on in your state, but I knew in the UK, somewhere in the winter, we kind of did all this mess. All right, we're cool. We've had enough. We're going out. And then we went, and then a month later, we went, oh, no, we can't go out. Everybody back in. It was literally just a complete, So near that time, I was like, oh, and then some of my friends were then looking at your stream, and my brother, there was like I got a best friend, a brother, and another good friend. If they tell me that they're going to play a game, they go, "Oh, I've been watching some stuff from Team Covenant, watching whatever," and they say they're going to jump in. I go, "Okay, well, I'll have a look then." If Team Covenant's saying it's pretty good and you want to play it, okay, let's have a look. Let's come around.
Check the boxes, yeah.
Both of my best friends and my brother said, "We want to have a look at this Flesh and Blood game. It looks pretty good." Like, we're playing. We're in.
Yeah.
Where do we buy it from? There's no one in the UK selling. But it was also,
we're in, but we can't get it.
But it was really weird because one of the guys in our local area who was watching your thing on Flesh and Blood, and he was watching obviously your streams that happened in June and July and everything. He loved it that much. He was like, "Oh my god, this is so cool." So you guys influenced this other guy to buy I think he bought 16 cases from New Zealand. Right?
Wow.
He had money. Guys rich. He had money. Yeah.
And then later that year, he had more money.
Yeah. Well, no, madness. He gave it to a store for store credit, right? So the store did okay.
Wow.
This guy doesn't.
Amazing.
This guy doesn't. Money's not an issue. Money's not an issue. He went, "I just want this to be played here." So our little store, Manascrew in the UK, was one of I think it was the first or one of the very, very first stores that they had no distributor whatsoever. They literally did sealed, and this is where we had sealed Arcane Rising First Edition, which was at the time just Arcane Rising. They were doing sealed Arcane Rising games with there's no, you can't buy this stuff. In fact, it was starting to go ramp to the craziness.
Yeah. Going to the moon, man.
It was going to the moon, and he was like, "Well, I'm not selling it, but I will do sealed events." Sold out. I was like,
"Yeah,
how do we get product? You just go to Manascrew, and you just do a sealed event.
You play
the game.
Awesome.
You just play the game."
Yeah.
So we just went sealed, sold out. Here's your little pods. Here's your masks. Here's your boxes of wipes for everything. It was insane. It was the dumbest thing ever. Like how we tolerated that, but you just did, didn't you? Because you do anything to get out of your house and just try and socialize. And that's when this game started to go absolutely bonkers. Do you think did Flesh and Blood do a massive? Is it really helped you guys as a store, as a company? Has Flesh and Blood as a game kind of really helped sort of keep you guys going over through the COVID season stuff?
Yeah, I mean, Flesh and Blood, obviously 2020, 2021 was kind of a crazy phase for the game for a lot of reasons. And it's been very notable for us. Huge game, huge community. And a lot of people that play Flesh and Blood didn't have any idea who Covenant was before Flesh and Blood. Wow. And
I find weirdly, I find that like, oh really? But still
but I think a lot of people come in from Magic and Pokemon and Yu-Gi-Oh! And if you weren't in the underdog game segment and the LCGs and all that stuff, it would be very easy not to know who we are. But if Fab hadn't come along, we would still be continuing to be a company and operating, right?
Of course. Of course.
But it definitely was a huge. It was great for us, right? Especially in 2020, 2021, when everything was uncertain and all that business. We actually, so we talk about the different iterations of our store. The first one was 1.0, second was 2.0.
Yeah.
And the lease on 2.0 was set to end at the end of 2020. And after we opened 2.0 so we opened 1.0 in 2012 and we moved to 2.0 in 2015. And about 2016, we realized that 2.0 was a big improvement, but it wasn't anywhere near what we really wanted to be doing. And so 2016 to 2020 was kind of us building the business to a point where we could have the time and resources to build the store how we really wanted it.
Yeah.
And so going into 2020, we ramped into working on 3.0 because the goal was to be in 3.0 basically by the beginning of 2021. And of course, we ramp up. We're doing research. We're finalizing what we want the business model to look like, and what kind of space we're needing, how much space we're going to need, and all that stuff. And then the pandemic hits, and we have to close the local store. 2.0, our revenue goes to zero. And luckily, we did have extra resources that we were planning on putting towards the store, so that's why we could, potentially keep paying people for some number of months, even if we didn't have any revenue coming in. But that obviously changed everything for us, because our lease was ending end of 2020. So that year we actually ended up moving to a temporary, in air quotes, temporary space, which we're still in today.
Yeah.
And even 2021, right? Like the vaccine didn't hit till the middle of the year for us, and it still wasn't quite sure what that would look like. So we had a lot of development going on, but we didn't have any idea when we'd actually be able to reopen. And as we kind of kept escalating our plans and our dreams of what 3.0 would look like, we realized we were spending a lot of money on it. And so got a little nervous to actually lease a space and invest this much money into the space. And so started asking ourselves a question, maybe we shouldn't lease, maybe we should own, so that whatever we're building is ours. And we ended up actually buying land in 2021. Then we started working with architects on the facility that we're trying to build, and we got done with that process mid 2022. Right. And then it was like, all right, we have our plans. Let's do this thing. Then we got the cost projections back from the contractors, and cost was about 80-90% more than the architects had expected across the board. Which led to some conversations, because we had been working with sort of estimated budgets from the architect, right? And we went pretty wild on these plans. But then beyond that too, there were some materials that we wanted to use that wouldn't be available for 12 to 18 months.
Right.
And so with a 12-month build out time plus a year and a half wait on some of these materials, we were looking at 2 or 3 years. Which is the whole conversation. So then we spent the next part of 2022 working on updated plans that, kind of pulled back in a few spaces to get the, in case prices don't go down, we need to have a plan where we could actually reasonably move forward. We also cut out all the materials that would take a long time to get and kind of finish that up. But now we're kind of just waiting because at least in America, interest rates are going up. There's a lot of talk about a recession and building collapse and all that kind of stuff. So we're being patient.
Yeah, same here in the UK as well.
But yeah, so Fab, was a big part of our success of the past 2 or 3 years. And so it really enabled us to comfortably invest time in developing something like 3.0, which that's kind of the next big step for us as a company, right? Why we exist and what we're focused on. Selling things online is a great thing to be able to do, and it allows our business to do what it does, but that's not really where the heart is. And so 3.0 is the next big step, and I think Fab was definitely contributing to our ability to dream a little bigger, if that makes sense.
I love it. I'm going to stick with Fab for a little bit. So, how excited are you for Outsiders now? Like in terms of we're getting a draft set finally after Uprising. It's been a long time of Uprising. Dynasty was cool set. Didn't really do an awful lot in the changing the scene of the competitive space. Largely felt like we were laying some groundwork to a house we don't own yet, but I
know that feeling.
Yeah, but it's cool stuff. Didn't really do much. So we've been stuck in the Uprising meta for a little bit of a while now. Now we're finally going to get Outsiders. How excited are you for that?
So
Zach, the player.
A couple pieces of context on that. First is I'm very excited about a new limited set. Period. Like Uprising Limited was fun for a minute, and then the curve kind of fell off for me at some point, right?
Yeah, whenever went, Fi, yeah, it's good.
Yeah,
I'm sure people will get better. Yeah, if you get really good with Dromai or Icelander, That's when you get really good. Oh no, it's just fine. All right, okay.
Yeah. Cool. But then, so last year for me, organized play wise it was a very packed year. I mean, I went to the Indianapolis calling, the Vegas calling, Pro Tour 1, Pro Tour 2, World Championship, National Championship, 2 ProQuest seasons that were 3 or 4 weeks long each, a Road to National season that was 3 or 4 weeks long. And I also had a couple other personal trips throughout the year and business trips and stuff. So like last year was crazy.
Yeah.
The reason I say that is when Worlds happened, after Worlds, I kind of just checked out and took a break. So
I think everyone did. We were like,
yeah. So Dynasty came out and it was not limited, and also I was on break. So
there was
I opened my boxes
either.
and
that was the weirdest
opened
thing.
my boxes, put them in the binder, and then didn't really even check back in until like the week of my first ProQuest. And played for a couple weeks. And honestly, like one of my big goals as a player for this year is to get to the end of the year and not be burnt out. So last year it was just too much. And the way they announced the events, like I kept doing stuff and then not like I planned to take a month off after Pro Tour 1. And a couple weeks before Pro Tour 1, they were like, oh, ProQuest season's going to start the week of Pro Tour 1. And it was like, well, I guess I'll do that. And then they were like, oh, we're going to do a team calling in Vegas. And I was like, well, I love team events. I really want to support this and want them to do more team events. So I guess I'll go to Vegas.
Yeah.
Went to Vegas. So you do Pro Tour 1, right into ProQuest season, right into Vegas. I got COVID at Vegas, so I was really down for a couple weeks. And then right after that was like Road to National season. So anyways.
Yeah, it's a lot. I'm with you.
It was a lot. And I kept planning to take a break and then not really getting to because of the schedule. And so I definitely took the foot off the gas. And this year I was planning to do less no matter what happened. And they kind of reduced the schedule a little bit for me. So that's made it easier. But I say all that to say I am looking forward to Outsiders primarily because it's a limited set. It's the first time there's been a set where none of the classes in the set are really my class. So
that's interesting.
Yeah. So
who is your class?
Steven's been Runeblade is number 1.
Yeah.
And Guardian-ish is second. But really,
well, you've been I don't like a while then.
Yeah, I don't like Oldhim. Like I don't like playing Oldhim. Right? He's fine. He's whatever.
I know. I find it the other way around. I don't mind playing these heroes that are like in my world boring. But playing against them is why they're boring. I'm like, ugh. Yeah, I don't want to play against Oldhim.
Yeah, I just I like to play offense, right?
So what about Uprising then? Because Uprising didn't seem to have your classes in that one either.
So I'm going back to Game of Thrones a little bit.
Yeah,
huge House Targaryen fan.
All right, so Dromai was thumbs up.
So Dromai is at least like interesting.
Yeah.
And then Icelander, Wizard is not. I'm not uninterested in Wizard.
Oh, yeah. I'm with you there.
Yeah, but it's just not my main thing. I'm just not like it's not a main situation for me. So, but that was at least a limited set, right? And I love limited. I love pre-releases. I love sealed. I love draft. But this set is like so. Ranger. Steven's been on Ranger since day one.
Yeah.
So I'm gonna write Ranger off my list. And then Assassin. I could be interested in Assassin, and the new Assassin character looks cool to me. So
okay, yeah,
maybe. And then Ninja. It's okay. It's okay.
My co-host Simon and my other co-host Trip, they love Ninja so much, but they're boring individuals, so it's fine.
That checks out. Yeah, all the ninjas I know also terribly boring. But it's fine.
Yeah.
But Ninja's not really my thing. So, and the pits as a setting is not. It's not. I'm neutral basically on the classes and the theme of this set. Like Arya, it was elemental, love elemental theme. Monarch was kind of this like good and evil, angels and demons. I like that theme. Even Uprising was this like dragons and fire and phoenixes, and like I dig that theme. And so I knew this was coming though, because like the pits and metrics to me specifically are just not that appealing. And so I knew we would get to sets that are not the classes and not like the regions that I really care as much about, and that's okay.
Yeah.
Um,
Mine is
but
going to be Mysteria. We'll rock up there, and I'll be like, is that the whole like that? All that side of that like it was kind of weird as well. I was kind of a little bit with the Uprising side of things. I was like, it's fine. Leave this one. So, like
Yeah.
I think I brought like a box. It's like, it's all cool. And then yeah, Icelander was like, oh, actually, like you, wizard, yeah, wizard man, wizard. I could do wizard.
I could get into that.
I could do wizard. That's pretty good. It's pretty good.
Yeah.
So yeah, I'm with you on that. I find fair enough. If so, this is your set. This is the area where you're like, I can take it or leave it. It's all good.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And you know, I'll still buy my boxes and collect, and I'll mess around, but it's not the same. Like, I was very excited about Monarch and very excited about Arya, and then of course the supplemental sets are what they are.
Yeah.
And then at least with Uprising, like the dragons and the Marvel dragons particularly were really cool. Like, that's just from a collector standpoint, and I'm definitely a collector. That was really cool. And then now we're kind of in a set where those Marvels from this next set look cool. But I'm like if there's a Venn diagram of collector, player, and like, I don't know, finance speculator person. It's like, you know, like collectors and the finance people kind of have overlap, and then players, you know, you can be in different bubbles. But for me, I'm like right in that collector player bubble.
Yeah.
So like I don't really care about the value of things because it's worth something and because I can sell it later for more or whatever. But I do like collecting things that I actually want to play. If that makes sense.
Yeah, no, I'm with you.
So like the Marvels and the dragons, it's like, well, I'll eventually get into the dragons. Like, so I want to collect those. But even looking at Outsiders, it's kind of just like, it's the first time where I'm not like, oh, there's definitely these things I have to get, right? Or I really want this thing. I'll get my play sets for building decks later if I want to play this thing at some point in the future. But so from that side, I'm not as pumped. But yeah, I'm mostly just ready for a new limited experience. I'll say that.
Yeah, no, that's really cool, man. What you're really saying is we need more Viscerai, James White. Come on, man.
Yes.
We want an upgraded, we want a Starvo level, not Starvo, power level, but a sort of Bravo treatment for the Viscerai. That'd be, Shadow Viscerai in the next expansion set. Now, because Shadow and Light are definitely coming into this expansion set. I know it's not been said, but it's definitely a read between the lies moment of where James White has said they are coming out this year, and they have said there is only one expansion set. So it is like, unless you pull a fast one, which they're very good at doing.
They are good at doing.
They're very good at doing. It's pretty. The writing's on the wall for a Shadow Runeblade. Wouldn't it be so cool?
I mean, we'll definitely get a Shadow Runeblade. I honestly,
Shadow Viscerai.
If they're gonna pull a fast one, I think the fast one would be given us like a light Viscerai.
I don't know how I'd feel, bro.
So
I actually might sell up. I'm joking. I've got like a big tattoo of a rune chant on me, and I just like,
I love it.
He's a light dude, and we'll be like, like then Nelson will show up. I'm like, I collected all these cold-full weapons. I've got his map. I've got a tattoo, and he's a good guy. No.
Yeah, we'll see. Anything Viscerai. Honestly, the fact that we can still play old school Viscerai makes me very happy. And he ebbs and flows between great and not so great, just depending on the meta.
Bring back Skeletor.
Yeah, well, that would help a lot.
You can take Sonata away. Can I just move on to this last little bit? Because I'm very conscious of your time. I'm sure you're going to have to scoot off soon. Some of our patrons have chucked us a couple of questions. Would it be okay if I can throw them over to you? Now, we can see where this takes us. So, Alex Kitsu, who was our semi-finalist of the Italian Bologna, he came in the semi-finals with Viscerai Pummel. He is giving you a question saying, what is your favorite card game or tabletop tournament of all time of the organization and experience, and why?
Who?
Oh no.
So basically, favorite card game is what's being asked, right?
Or tabletop game. Just that I don't know, and I know this is a bit of there's going to be some that are on different shelves of different loves, right? But when I said that to you, there was always one that jumps into your head. Like you subconsciously that one came straight into your head, and that is because it's got a deep rooted feeling. What was that game?
Yeah. Well, the first game I thought of is the Star Wars TCG.
Right. Yeah.
And this is like in the 2000s by Wizards of the Coast. And part of why that game has such a special place in my heart and soul is that was the first game we really competed at as a team. And so that's where Steven and I, who's one of the co-founders of Covenant, first really got. I mean, we had known each other and played games together, but like that's where we really started rolling together, you know. And that was the first tournament game where we had any amount of like tournament level success. So it was so when I play something like Fab, which, you know, in terms of favorite games, Fab is the ones that come to my mind are Fab, Destiny, Star Wars TCG, and Netrunner. Like those are like, if I just had to spit out 4 top card games, those are really high on my list. But those are all also in the category of like competitive card games. So to me, Fab is kind of the max realization of a competitive card game. And I can understand objectively that it's like the GOAT, right? Like it's at the top for me. But a game like Star Wars TCG, I have nostalgia and history with, right? And it's like this special time in life where the first time this experience was had is with that game. So it's hard to separate those feelings from, you know, my would-be ranking list or whatever. So anyways, those are the games that come to mind.
I completely agree with you there. Where Flesh and Blood is definitely, I am in this boat of going, there will be in like 5-10 years time, who knows where I am or where I am with this game or whatever. But it's hard to take away how special this game is going to be for a lot of people going forward. Whether you're in it and the game is still going, but you're no longer with it, you're going to just get old and go, man, that game was nuts. There was a time and place in my life. This game was nuts. And we're still on the train, so we don't have to talk about the nostalgia of the train because we're still riding it.
Yeah, totally.
So James Armstrong has said, what was it like live streaming 4 or 5 times a day for almost 2 years? Was it difficult to maintain enthusiasm, especially for playing on your own time off stream? And as a follow-up, how do you feel now that you've cut back a little bit? So he's a big fan of yours and watches a lot of your stuff.
That's awesome. So it was simultaneously one of the best times and hardest times, right? I think the pandemic itself was really tough for a lot of people, and we always just felt incredibly grateful and just so grateful that what we were doing, and for the first year and a half, 2 years, you know, Steven and I had extremely tight COVID bubbles because we were getting together in person with each other, and very much like there was a time where I was just seeing Steven and then my wife and my brother Tim and his wife Hannah. And that was it. That was like my entire social circle for like a year of this, right? But honestly, I think we just felt so fortunate and grateful that what we got to do during that crazy moment in our lives was hang out with each other and play games for 4 or 5 hours a day, and to welcome a bunch of people from all over the world to join us for that. And the amount of support and the number of people that bought stuff from us and bought tokens and were subscribers to the different subscription services we have and all that was really remarkable. And so it, on the one hand, it's like, I can't believe this is my life, right? Like, this is amazing. And the fact that we get to do that, and it meant a lot to a lot of people, especially people going through some darker times during the pandemic. But on the other hand, like, now having scaled back a little bit, you can kind of see things with clearer eyes, where streaming 3, 4, 5 hours a day, 4 or 5 days a week has a cost. It's an energy cost. It's a brain space cost. It's a cost to take something that you love and to do it so often under a kind of professional setting and publicly is very different than just like hanging out and, cracking a beer and playing a game and doing your thing. And like, it's sort of grass greener on the other side of the fence, where I think a lot of people are envious of that life, right? But at the same time, once you flip that switch, like very rarely when we were streaming 4 or 5 days a week was I playing games outside of work to enjoy it.
Yeah.
Right.
Just you just
to
did
do
that.
it.
It's like going to work to go home and go, do you want to do some
Yeah.
more of what you just been doing? No, I'm cool, bro.
Yeah. And I think, once the Fab OP started up, I played a lot more outside of work, Fab. But I think that was also part of my burnout, is like playing 20, 30 hours on stream and then practicing 20, 30 hours a week off stream. Like 60 hours a week playing games is nuts.
Yeah,
honestly,
I mean,
60,
I'm trying to
70
work
hours.
out, how did you manage to keep that energy and drive to, because you obviously got a team called the Wolf Pack with Malcolm Hamilton. Oh. Well, so you got your team. You're trying to you're trying to be a Fab player, and you're also trying to juggle Team Covenant, and you've got to be interested, passionate about all these other games. Do you know what I mean? It's juggling all of that.
I do know what you mean.
Well, you do it, but that sounds hard.
Yeah, I mean,
really hard.
I think it's the kind of thing that, like, I would never just come out and say, because like, oh, it's so tough, you have to play all these games. But realistically, like, I do think it had a tax, right? And part of why we scaled back is it was not sustainable. To even just, there was a time where we were about a year in to streaming 5 days a week, and like the depth we were going into games and the width of the number of games we were going to that depth with, I've never experienced something like that, right? It's almost like you're seeing for the first time, right? Because it would almost be like if you could feel everything all at once, right? Or you could think everything all at once, where there were games where we were getting really deep into Arkham and we were competing at Fab, and we were really deep into Marvel Champions, and we were really doing these throwback series where we're going dive into the Star Wars CCG and this crazy game. And like, it just gave such a broad perspective, which I think was really cool. And it gave us so much context on game design and the industry and what's going on and all this stuff. But definitely towards the end of last year, just getting to the point where it was like getting burnt out, and just like tired. And we were tired, honestly, just very tired. And I think people could start to sense too that energy was waning. And
it's like, hey everyone, we're back.
And it was also tough because, like, even now we're working on some pretty big projects that, like I had to schedule a meeting just this morning. I was scheduling a meeting for Tuesday afternoon. And anytime we had to get me and Steven plus anyone else on the team into a meeting with a third party, like our architects for our local space, as an example. There was one time I was trying to schedule a meeting with the architects, and the first time I could get me, Steven, who's in charge of marketing, Robert, who's in charge of our operations, and the architects on a call, was like 3.5 weeks from now, because half of our work schedule is me and Steven streaming. But then in the other half, you have to have all your business meetings, all your work has to get done, right? And so there's a lot of standing meetings that I would have or Steven would have on Tuesday morning and Wednesday after the stream and all that stuff. So it's just very challenging to actually, as a business, move forward with anything at a reasonable rate, right? Like, it would just take forever to do things that shouldn't take forever. What were you gonna say?
No, I was just gonna say that you are living the world of what a lot of store owners every store owner say, trying to run a store and play a game. And you're trying, well, yours is a big store. Yours is bigger than just running your LCG. You're trying to do quite a lot of things. You're being a social media presence. You're a streamer. You're an LCG. You're an online place and a player. And I'm going to do them all. We're doing it all, baby. If anyone says that's not hard work, it's insane work. And I only just do the club and I do this, and I'm and a family member, trying to play games as well. I think there's the cost of this is you try your best at tournaments as best as you can, but we're no Michael Hamilton, right? We're no Matt Folks. We're not, all these.
No one's Michael Hamilton except Michael Hamilton.
No, exactly. He's got more living legend points than Oldham, right? So he's nuts. So there's a point where you got to go, look, I'm going to go to these tournaments, do my best, but I ain't got the time to slam like you guys slam. I haven't got the space and the energy to do. So do you know what I mean? I imagine you must go to these events of just going, I'm here and playing. I'm going to enjoy it.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I ultimately had a pretty good season last season. But it is tough. It's just, I feel like everyone has these things in life, right? And you just have to choose where you're going to put your time. And I think I mentioned earlier, one of my goals this year is to get to the end of the year and not be burnt out on fab. And so I think there's a lot of stuff going on in my life right now. These cycles are normal, right?
Yeah.
Which is you build up, you add things, and then you optimize, and then what's not working, you take away, and you kind of just keep cycling, right? And so even the Wolfpack, last year, starting the Wolfpack, and that was a whole thing, and figuring out, our team is pretty big at this point, and all of a sudden it's like now I have this other thing that's going on. So how are we going to do this? How can we be? That was during the break after Worlds. A lot of questions about how can we be more effective and efficient with what we're doing. And it's just this process where even with Covenant, right, it was like, all right, we've been streaming 4 or 5 days a week with the pandemic. Let's look at this and say, how can we achieve what we're achieving, but can we do it more efficiently? What's not working? What is working? What are we actually excited to get up and do, right? Because I think the answer to how this all happens, right? How do you run a business and manage a competitive fab team and compete at these things, and how do you stream this, all that stuff? How do you keep streaming and keep being excited about it? Is you have to actually be super excited and passionate about whatever it is you're doing. And if that's true for all these variables, the friction that gets created is that you sometimes have to choose, right? Like, am I going to be a good husband, or am I going to be a good CEO? Am I going to be a good team member, or am I going to be a good brother to my brothers or my family members? There's only so many hours in the day, and I don't have kids yet, so that's a huge. You're creating content, you're running a gaming club, you're working a job, you're being a dad, you're being a husband. I don't think. I assume that's you got the same thing going on. And you keep showing up and you keep making the content, right?
It's the same, but it's different. If that makes sense. The weight of what it is different, but the families and everything are always the same. But what from your perspective, the gaming space is your livelihood. So to me, I'm like, oh my god, it's bigger than my thing, man. Even though I know what I'm doing, it's actually a big deal as well in a different way. But yeah, it's just you're in it. You're in this space. Everything you're doing, your work and your passion and your pleasure is all in the same spot. So that's why it feels like you're in a much spot. I've got a couple more. I feel you're definitely a content creator.
I'll just add one thing there, I think that's both helpful and dangerous, right? Like everything being in that one spot. Outside my family, even that, my little brother does all this stuff with me, right? Like he's on the Wolfpack and he's playing fab and all that stuff. But I think there's a risk in. The only way it works for me is because of how much I actually am passionate about and care about this hobby, right? Because
you can tell. You can absolutely tell.
Well, I'm glad to hear that. But the real thing is even doing stuff like being on content and whatnot. Like the risk is though that you can burn out, right? And everyone's built different. And some people it would be too much, right? Like you think you love games and you think you love the hobby, but it's different. Even like you running the gaming club and doing the content, it's like you're most people don't love it that much, right?
Yeah, they want
they
want to participate. They want to buy the stuff. They want to go to the
Yep.
thing. They want to go to this place that does it. They just want to consume it, bugger off back home, and go back to work and go, cool, I've had my armory night. That's it. Yeah.
And that's totally fine,
They're the
right? That's totally fine. But the other part, I will say, like compared to, I think, a lot of game store owners, a lot of other people in the space who are running business or doing content, I have an exceptional team of people around me, right? Like I mentioned at the top of the show how hard it is to create content. And, I understand that in the early days, I did a lot of the podcast editing. I did a lot of blog writing, that kind of stuff. But, I did do some very light video editing early on, but like,
yeah,
really the streams, right? I show up, right? And like, I show up and I'm responsible a lot of times for like all the throwbacks. A lot of times I would procure the game and I would read the rules beforehand and I'd be doing that stuff. But I get to show up and teach Steven how to play the game. We get to play the game on camera, and like I have to bring to that a certain amount of energy and effort and whatever it takes to do content. But Steven's obsessing over the technology and the quality, the bit rates and the coloring, and Jonathan is figuring out these crazy technologies to get the cars to show up and all that kind of stuff. And Bryce is, he spent months listening to our streams. I didn't even know this. This is a crazy story. But during the first 2 or 3 months of this pandemic, he was listening on a like Google voice call, right? And he was listening for us to say names of cards so that he could type it into the system to pop these things on screen as we're playing them, right?
Right. So it's like so he's imagining this was live.
Yeah, and we were live. Like he's on a Google voice call. Oh. So he's on a call live.
Oh, right.
Remoting in.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay.
He's remoting in, and if I say, scar for a scar, he types scar for a scar, hits the button, it makes the car pop on the screen, right? But I didn't know at the time. I thought he was just like watching the stream live. But there's a like 6 or 7 second audio delay so that when I say scar for a scar, he can pull it up in time that it'll actually show up about the time that I'm saying it.
Okay.
And so he didn't have anything up. He was just listening. And like, we were doing some crazy throwbacks where who knows what these cards are named. Like,
it's like, oh no.
Yeah. Yeah. So all that to say, like, we're streaming 4 or 5 days a week. It takes a lot of work to get ready for the stream, to have it ready, to play the thing, to be live. I'm an introvert by nature. So like the energy it takes to just be in front of a camera and to interact with Steven and to interact with chat and to manage all that and to play games is a lot. But I have a phenomenal team of people, and that's just the market, the content side, right? Let alone the business side. So there's a lot of parts of this that, we kind of reached a scale that it is a lot of work, right? Running a company and dealing with all the stuff that happened in the pandemic and policies and all the stuff I have to deal with. But at the same time, like I have an exceptional group of people around me that makes it a lot easier and it makes it possible, right? So I wanted to mention that before we moved on.
No, dude. Honestly, that's cool. I'm just want to make sure that I'm not taking up too much of your time, because if as you can tell, when I throw you a question, you're like, I'm gonna give you a home run. Brilliant for me. I just want to make sure that I'm not taking up too much of your time.
Yeah, we're good. We'll round them out here, but keep going.
Cool. So Jason Hamer said, "Why did you grow your hair so long?" And also, T Covenant got so many of us originally playing in the UK into this game from their videos, himself included. How does that make you feel, knowing that you're pretty much one of the main reasons why it's kind of Flesh and Blood specifically, and I will say other games, which you have said before.
Yeah.
How does it make you feel knowing that you're a big reason why this game exists in the UK?
So I'll give you answering the first part about my hair. So growing up, a lot of the people that were kind of my heroes, except for Michael Jordan, had longer hair.
Yeah.
So I love the Beatles. I mean, there's all kinds of examples of this. Another one is I really got into professional wrestling with my grandpa when I was a kid.
Yeah.
And the coolest person in the world to me is Sting, the wrestler.
All right.
Especially when he went through his crow phase and he had the black and white face paint and the long hair.
Bro, I was the Attitude Era of Rock, Stone Cold Steve Austin, Undertaker, Kane, Hell in the Cell match with Kurt Angle and Triple H. That was my era. You got Triple H vibes coming on.
Yeah. And then, classic like Aragorn from Lord of the Rings.
Yeah.
And you just kind of go down the list. So when I was in high school, all the kids on my basketball team were shaving their head, and they were all kind of like, how do I say it nicely? Just kind of like annoying teenager kids, right?
Yeah.
And so like I was like, I'm gonna do the opposite. I'm gonna not cut my hair. Like I want to grow my hair out and have long hair. So in high school, I had long hair. That was just what I did.
Right.
And then around 2015, we have an annual holiday party at Covenant where we get together and look at the year and how did it go and celebrate and all that. And that year we had a theme of Mad Men.
Right.
So 50s, 60s stuff. So I actually cut my hair for the holiday party, and that's the first time I had it short after like a decade of having long hair.
Right.
And then I had the short hair for 3 or 4 years. After that, I just kept it short. I liked it. And then honestly, like a year and a half before the pandemic, I noticed my hair starting to thin.
Right.
And so I was like, all right, if I'm ever gonna have long hair again, it's now or never.
Yeah.
Like, if I'm not gonna pull a Hulk Hogan and be bald on top and have long hair coming out the side. So I started growing my hair out, and then I was actually thinking about cutting it, and then the pandemic started, and it was like, well, I guess I'm just not cutting my hair for a while. And now we're at the point where my hair is very long.
Your hair is really long.
Yeah,
it's growing even more from when I last saw you at Worlds.
Yeah, it's very long. And to me, this is probably like the last time I'm gonna have long hair, so I'm just letting it cruise for a while. We'll see how long it goes.
Oh, are you going?
And then at some point, I'll cut
Tangled. Oh yeah.
Yeah, I want it. Can it touch the ground?
Can it touch the ground?
Yeah, and then cool. To answer the second question, I mean that's incredibly motivating, right? I think our tagline very early on was "Gaming Reborn," and our logo was a phoenix in the shape of a spade.
Yeah.
And we eventually evolved to a phoenix in the shape of a C for Covenant. And a big part of our motivation early was we think tabletop could be better and it should be better. And we think specifically that there are a lot of really good games and publishers that aren't getting time of day because they're not Magic and Pokemon and Yu-Gi-Oh! And it's not easy.
Yeah.
And so when we support a game, that's like talking about Flesh and Blood early on, and you just hear the passion and vision that someone like James has and the whole Legend Story team. Part of why we choose the games that we choose is we are trying to find publishers that we want to support and believe in and who we think deserve the time of day. And so the idea that the work we're doing can bring a game and a publisher like Legend Story and Fab into the radar of people that otherwise would not have ever interacted with it or heard of it is incredibly motivating. I mean, it's really awesome to hear that when people say, you got me into this game or you got me into this hobby, because that just means what we're doing is achieving what we're setting out to do, right? And yeah, it's very meaningful to hear that kind of stuff.
That's cool. You guys are like the seed. You throw the news out, and then we'll just let the communities within the areas decide about what they're going to do with that, whether it grows or flourishes in any way. But most of the time, everything kicks off from you guys delivering the news on, this is what we're really passionate about, this is what we really enjoy, and this is what we think is going to be good for you to look at. So yeah, thank you so much for continuing to do that. I have one more bit of that would have been a really cool one to actually end on, but I've got one more. I have got one last one. That was like that was a good one to end on. But Jake Arms says that the LGSs, this one's a pretty serious one. So LGSs in the UK sometimes raise concerns about not being able to shift as much sealed product from their stores compared compared with singles from single sellers. Have you found that the exclusive promos that Team Covenant offers has helped your sales? And do you think LSS should bring back some box toppers? Because I remember when Crucible of War came out and everything, got the cult full of weapons and stuff if you buy a box, and you're like, ooh, that's pretty cool. All that special promo stuff for getting a box. So in short, really, you do get these Team Covenant promo stuff. It is a really cool special thing for people to come and buy the product from you guys. And it is sometimes have that, some stores have that sort of same feeling of, well, we don't have that. So and there's a lot of UK players that do go, don't buy too much from our stores because we really want to get we get the same stuff from you. But they will buy some stuff from their stores anyway because they're all really cool and what they're locals. But a lot of traffic goes your way because of the promos that you offer. You think that would be something that could be workable, like a box topper thing? I don't know. It's a pretty open question. What do you think?
Yeah. So this has kind of been a conversation in the zeitgeist of Fab for a second. Both like prizes at tournaments from stores and also should stores get promos and all that stuff. And I think it's a good question to ask, right? A good question to, if you're a local store, to be asking. And we actually just recorded, we do a podcast called the Covenant Cast. And we just recorded an episode. There was a post the other day on Reddit that kind of inspired the episode of the podcast that we just recorded, which it was on Reddit and it was titled something like, LSS needs the local game store more than the local game store needs LSS or Fab.
That is a very interesting topic.
Yeah. And, we covered this kind of topic pretty extensively there, and we had a whole hour plus on it.
Well, then I recommend everyone to go check out that episode because I don't want you to go full in on it.
Yeah, well, I won't spend an hour on it, but I think there's a couple pieces of this that are just worth understanding or mentioning, right? So one is, obviously we do have an exclusive promo that goes with every box in our subscription. And two, I could go on for a long time about this, so I'm going to condense it down, of course. But yeah, check out the podcast. But the, to get that promo, right, you have to sign up for a subscription, which is committing to product. You don't pay crazy far in advance, but you do pay before it comes out, right? And a lot of times we've charged for subscriptions before preview season even hits. And we're going to be doing that this time. There have been a couple previews, but we'll be charging, I think, this week or next week, and that's going to be before preview season for outsiders.
Right.
And so you basically are getting this promo if you're willing to sign up to automatically receive future boxes, and a lot of times without information about what the set is or what's going to be in it and all that kind of stuff. And that's obviously helpful for us to project some amount of demand to Legend Story, and also it's just a different kind of system, right? It's rewarding early orders effectively. And there are a lot of upsides to buying products from a local store potentially, right? The fact that you don't have to commit to it till it shows up, you can go buy it right now, et cetera, et cetera. But all that to say, I think there's also a few parts of it. I'm trying not to just dive into the whole thing, but a few parts of it are, getting buy a box promos to local stores and local stores alone is actually quite challenging, because, how is Legend Story going to do this, right? How do they actually logistically do it? Because if they send the promos with the prize kits and the armory shipments, that doesn't really map to boxes that are being bought or sold by local retailers, right?
Right.
If they send it to distribution, well, now we're assuming distribution is willing to send buy a box promos to local stores on a 1-to-1 ratio for every box they're also sending to a local store.
Which is just extra work for them that they'll be like, yeah, I'm all right. I'm cool, bro. Just here's your boxes.
Yeah. And are they even going to do it? And then even if they do it, these buy a box promos that show up at, let's say it goes through distribution.
Yeah.
One issue with distribution in general is, how does Legend Story Studios make sure that those actually get to local game stores, and local game stores that are going to sell these locally. And not just because we've seen with other buy a box promos they've had, there are other stores or other, random TCG player account things. And it's like, oh, they have 100 copies of this cold foil weapon somehow. How did that happen? And so, on the surface, the idea of if local stores had a buy a box promo, I don't think that's necessarily a problem. But there is like a logistical component of how do you actually pull it off? And then also, at this point with Outsiders, the first time they're doing multi-language, multi-country, simultaneous release days. And so maybe you get one, or let's say you get both your US distributors to sign on to send these promos, right? Well, now you also have to get your UK distribution, your European distribution, your New Zealand distribution, your Australian distribution. They all have to sign on to manage the same process, right? So there's hurdles there, but then there's also kind of a fundamental recognition on my part. We talked about 3.0 and the lack of retail focus for us, the 3.0 version of our store.
Yeah.
And I have a very strong belief that the primary ways that a local space offers value doesn't have anything to do with selling stuff. Because again, if you're a retail store selling boxes of fab, you can buy boxes of fab from a lot of places. Mm-hmm. And even without promos, right? Or other incentives like we have, we were, as a local store for a long time, struggling against deep discount online retail, where X-Wing would put out a ship and the MSRP would be $15. And, most of the time retail stores for a lot of games are paying around 50% of MSRP to buy the product. So you pay $7.50 for an X-Wing ship. And there were big brand online websites selling X-Wing ships for $8, $8.50. And so, at one point I had a friend telling me, like a new wave of X-Wing was coming out. He was spending a couple $100s in our store. And he was like, hey, just so you're aware, like I could have bought these online and saved $100. And like, that moment really stuck with me because I'm selling the exact same product to you. And I'm effectively asking you to pay more for that same product to buy it from me.
Yeah.
And like, there are retail advantages of buying that product locally, which is you can buy it now, you can buy how many you want on site, you can look at it before you buy it, you can verify that it's this is what it is. And do you want a sealed case? Look, it's right here. It's sealed, you can see it.
Yeah.
What's the condition of the box? What's all that kind of stuff? But I say all that to say, I empathize with local stores because I think they do a lot of work and provide a lot of value. And the system is supposed to reward that value by them having discounts on products that they can buy and sell, right? But that indirect relationship is actually really muddy because if you're investing in building a local fab community and hosting local fab events and teaching people the game and all that kind of stuff, that's not actually how stores make money, right? No. Most of the time. Like they make money by selling a product. But if you're selling a $100 box and you can buy the $100 box for $80 online, it's, a big retailer in the States, at least, is named Best Buy. They do electronics.
Right.
And they went through a phase where they were really struggling because people would come in and get trained how to use a product in store and get their questions answered, pull out their phone and order it on Amazon and have it delivered to their door. And Amazon has crazy return policies that are super favored for the customer and all this kind of stuff. So the reason I mention any of this is like, I understand that competing against exclusive promos could make it tough to do. And in your case, you guys are in the UK, so like it's expensive to have a subscription with us if you're in the UK.
Yeah,
and you have to pay.
He did say UK distribution when.
Yeah. So there's those elements of it, but the I think there's a bigger question that needs to be being asked here on the retail level, and that's the entirety of 3.0 is kind of asking/answering this question, which is if what we're doing as a local retailer that provides value for players and publishers is not selling the product, how do we actually create a model that doesn't rely on selling that product to exist? Because it's not going to get easier, right? it's so much easier for products to be bought online, to be sold online. And even if you have buy a box promos, it's like, how many get made? Do you make one for every box that's going out to local retail? And then retailers too can sell online, right? So you're still then having to compete against retailers willing to sell it for less with the same promo. And like,
yeah, I know what you mean.
Yeah,
I know what you mean. It's a race to the bottom. And these promos are not going to make too much of a difference. They're just going to be, hey, we've all got the same. Like the magic of it goes when everyone's got it, and it's like, look how special this is. Yeah, but now we're back to the. But I'm going to get that and the topper card for $20 less. So we're still in the same boat, if that makes sense.
In the same thing. And I think that one of the things James said early on that really impressed me, and I liked actually, was his commitment to the local store and his commitment to sending the vast majority of boxes to local retailers. And so that's the other thing, is just understanding our scale and volume. Like I think it's less significant than people might imagine it is. And if the promo card was such a competitive advantage, honestly, I would expect us to be sold out of our subscriptions, right? Because there is a finite amount of boxes that we get and products we get and promos we get. And so like the fact that when things were crazy and boxes were $500 and we were only charging $100, yeah, we were sold out, of course.
Of course.
But once that went away, like, I feel like the volume we're moving a product is pretty reasonable, and in terms of percentage of global supply, the fact that we're not sold out, to me, the promo is a nice thing for people that want to buy things from us. But I don't get a sense that, I think as a local retailer, it might be easy if sales aren't great to say, well, we don't have a promo, so it's impossible for us to compete. But I still think the vast majority of
it doesn't seem like, it doesn't really weigh up. It doesn't really, if you're saying that, hearing on your side, it doesn't really add up on your side, does it? Because like, if it's true, we would definitely have these promos would definitely make everyone, and it's not even the case your end. So it's just like, well, I can imagine there will be a world in certain communities, certain stories, certain very small stuff that their scene was probably drastically quite small anyway. So the 3 dudes that showed up to play Flesh and Blood just went, hey, we also love Team Covenant, so we'll just buy the subscription from Team Covenant. And that one store goes, oh god, how am I going to compete? And it's like, yeah, well, you're 3 dudes, like, you know what I mean? But across the entirety of the UK, it's impossible to say that's the case. Like this, the game we wouldn't be having a calling in Birmingham if that was the case. You know what I mean? There wouldn't be a scene. Because all the stores were going in doing it.
Yeah, and I think that, Legend Story is aware of that, just in terms of how much they would give someone like us or Alpha Investments or whoever, where there's obviously a benefit to us, and there's a benefit for us existing. Even you were saying there are people in the UK that wouldn't otherwise have been in the game, right? And so like part of it too is back in mid 2020, when most retail stores didn't care at all about Legend Story or Fab, right? How do we get here? How do we get to the point where there are a lot of stores that care about Fab? And, we recognize, and I think, most people wouldn't understand these data points, but a ton of people that learn about these games from us or participate in the community and in our community and watch our streams and stuff don't actually buy products from us. And that's okay, right? Like that's totally understandable and reasonable, and people that want to support their local game store and buy there, I think is I don't begrudge that, right?
No, that seems,
but I would,
that morally is correct. Support your local and so on, but so on and so forth.
And I think the other piece of that though is very much challenging. I think if you as a player / customer, I encourage you to buy wherever you want to buy from, right? Whatever makes sense for you. But I also think that like, even as a local store ourselves, right? It was having to make, it depends on the product, but a TCG with $100 booster box, like, I think what really makes a huge impact is people basically have a point, right, where it's worth the extra. And so if your case is, I do all this stuff, so you should buy these boxes for me at full price, that's one model. But I think that there are some deeper questions that we've been asking. I think retailers out there should be asking, because I think the primary place they provide value is not in that product, right? So the moment, if you're buying 10 boxes and you could save $200 or $300 buying it online, from who knows who, you, as a local store, if you're charging full price, you're asking people to give you a $200 or $300 tip for these services you're providing, right? And services you're providing for free, seemingly to everyone who doesn't want to buy it from you. So it's a real conundrum. I think that's a big question mark and problem in the industry in general, is publishers reward these behaviors by discounts that go through distribution to retail, but have no mechanism for making sure the stores doing the work and providing the value are actually getting compensated for that work. So it's indirect, right? And I think there are these are the bigger kind of questions weighing on us, right? And so it's a tough one, and it's a long conversation. We did a whole podcast about it. Definitely recommend it if that's something you're curious about. Listen, but in general, I think my hope is that anything we're doing is net positive, both for us and the community, both players and retailers, right? So I still think the math on whatever we're doing and whatever exclusives we get, whatever, disproportionately favors and benefits others. And just understand the volume and stuff. I get it. I get where the concern's coming from, but I would just challenge that there's other questions we should also be asking as part of that.
Yeah. No. Well, dude, it has nearly been 2 hours. You are the longest running guest of this show. I thank you so much for giving me that time to have a chat about kind of really yourself, the game, and everything about it. I feel like I've learned a lot from listening to you. And dude, thank you so much for coming on this little pokey podcast called Push the Point.
Yeah, man. I really, really appreciate it. I appreciate all the kind words you've had, and the even in person, when we've interacted, like, just it means a lot hearing from people. So if you're out there listening, one, thanks for listening to this conversation for this long. But honestly, as I said at the top of the show, being a content creator is a lot of work, and I totally get that. So shout out to you. I'm happy to come on to these shows, and I do think content just like this is the real heartbeat of these communities, and it's a huge part of people being able to participate and enjoy being involved in these tabletop gaming communities. So thanks for having me. Thanks for putting in the hours, putting in the work. The gaming club, I mean, you're doing some serious work for your communities, and I'm honored that you want to have me on as a guest and that you'll let me ramble on for close to 2 hours.
Right.
And
we were, Simon and Trip would have definitely said to me, dude, you've got the worst guy on. I ramble like hell. But so the fact, this is probably why it's gone on for too long. 2 hours. You got two ramblers on two decent microphones. So
yeah. But yeah, if you're out there listening to this show, I highly encourage you to leave comments on the content, leave feedback, send them messages, because hearing from people that are enjoying what you're doing and getting something out of the time you're putting into it, or if you go to the local gaming club that's being put on, just say stuff, because it does mean the world to hear that kind of thing. And I know that you probably don't necessarily ask for that directly from people, but I know how much it means. So positive feedback and commentary means the world. If you're out there and you're playing Fab, keep doing it. This game is great. This community is great. It's an honor to be a part of. If you're at an event and you see me and you want to say hi, feel free. But keep it up. This is one of the best communities I've ever been in. And it's a privilege to get to play this game and participate. So cheers and thanks for having me.
Thank you so much, dude. Right. Take care. See you later, everybody.